month to do this and all of the countless hours that she spends in between keeping this project going. So thank you so much. And
we will note that there were no panic phone calls this time.
There were no. We've got this down pat. Every third time it works. So we're in good shape, and you can start the recording. And we always start with the first question is if anybody has any questions that need to be addressed promptly or any issues that they want us to talk about, we'll have a moment of about 10 seconds of silence for someone to raise their hand. At this point, the only people in the room that would raise their hand would be HypnoFun and
Arak and Nikita.
Arak and Nikita. There you go. Arak's raising his hand. Do you have an issue, Arak? Do you want to hear about this?
I was just wondering when it was appropriate to do self-promotion because I'm still doing my art show. Yay, team.
Yay!
But now may not be the time. I can do that towards the end if you would like.
Oh, you can talk about it.
I'm an artist. My website, for those who want to know, I will put on the chat. And I have a very large show. I have 21 items at a place called the Old Bakery and Emporium, just down the street from the Capitol on Congress, about 3 blocks away. You can Google it to find out.
What state is that?
Texas.
We're in Austin.
Which gives you reason number 2 to come and visit.
Yeah, it would be a drive. Okay. Hearing no other comments, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Z Daddy. And I would also comment that Daddy has a mental health background and is experienced working with trauma and developmental issues. And this has provided him with a lot of insight into this particular dynamic of daddy girl. His purpose is not to present himself as an expert or authority in this field, but to share this expertise with the community and to learn from them as well. Since his first, what would that be?
Daddy little girl.
Dominant daddy, little girl.
Dominant daddy, little girl. DS type relationship about 35 years ago.
So glad we have somebody that knows what these things are.
Thank you. Daddy has had the privilege of exploring this type of DS relationship with 4 amazing littles and has learned from each of them. Over the last few years, he's been involved with the community in Alabama and Georgia, and he's currently doming DS relationships, and he is currently in a double. Do it again.
Dominant daddy, little girl.
Little girl relationship. I've never seen it spelled out like that before. It's fascinating. Okay, Daddy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, and welcome everyone tonight. If you'll move to the slide that says overview, that will be great. I enjoy being here tonight, and I'm very glad to be here. I'd like to do a little bit of introduction of participants first to see who everyone is, to just get an idea of who you are and if you have any particular issues you'd like to discuss in this dynamic first. And then the disclaimer's already been given that I don't consider myself an expert. The terminology I use here is going to be my definitions, and certainly as many Kinksters as there are out there, there are going to be as many definitions. So I don't say that I'm right. I'm just wanting to use a common set of nomenclature and definitions so we can have an open discussion with that. Would it be okay to have everyone kind of introduce themselves briefly if you feel comfortable doing that? If you don't, that's fine.
It is or is not. HypnoFun won't allow his voice broadcast.
Okay.
Is that not true?
I don't know.
I thought that was true.
That might be true.
So, Arak, you're on. And also, Arak, you're not muted.
Well, if I'm going to talk, if I'm on, then it's probably appropriate. I am a sadistic dominant who identifies as a daddy. I'm in a relationship with a woman who doesn't really identify as a little, but is in fact 20-some odd years younger than I am. I like being referred to as a daddy, and I identify with it in that I take great pride in responsibility for her care in body, mind, and spirit.
Like 5 lines or $100 a month.
Why am I getting a radio broadcast somewhere?
Tandir is broadcasting right now.
Tandir, could you mute your mic?
Yes.
Trying to.
Ourselves, Master Tandir. If you would like to introduce yourself, you're welcome to do so. And Hypnophone, I didn't mean to deny you the opportunity of saying something. I just recall that you had not wished to broadcast. If you do wish to broadcast, you're welcome to come on now. Otherwise, I'll move on to Nikita and Ursula. So, Nikita and Ursula?
Hi, my name is Ursula, and I'm slave to Nikita, and we've been in a relationship for
Can't hear.
20-some years now.
I am not hearing anything.
I was hearing her, but very, very faintly.
I don't see any broadcast indicia by her name. Can you check the chat window?
There's nothing in the chat window.
Okay. Well, I will tell you that Nikita and Ursula are a couple from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I would say no more to them than that.
And they're here?
They are here. And if they wish to say something, they can either chat. They're evidently having a...
They're trying to fix the audio.
Okay, they're saying they're trying to fix the audio. As soon as you get it fixed, let us know. Right now, your hand is up, Nikita. Not anymore. Okay. Go ahead, Daddy Tim.
How about Tandir?
Tandir, would you like to introduce yourself, Master Tandir? I will tell you that Tandir is a leather master here in Austin, Texas.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you for that, those introductions. If we'll go to the next slide, which is overview. I have some slides here that are help. Can we go one back that says overview?
Overview.
Here?
No, one.
Page 2.
Yeah, thank you. The slides that I have will follow this type of a format. We've talked about introductions. I'm going to do a little bit of introduction of the topic and basic terminology, so we have a joint way to talk about these things. I have a number of discussion points that I'd like to bring up and present a little bit on, then have discussion about it. And then at the end, I want to discuss some unique issues and leave some time at the end for also group discussions of points of interest that we'd like to have. And so if that would, if that's a good way to proceed, we can do that. Can you go to the next slide, which is what is age play? So age play is a broad term that frequently is used to frequently describe a type of interaction between, frequently in the BDSM field, between dominants and submissives. It has a number of meanings, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but it's characterized frequently by an adult or adults that embrace a childlike or nurturing spirit and uses that in their life in different ways. And I'm also, a couple of these slides have adapted from Coco from Atlanta, Georgia, from a presentation she made called Age Play Elementary, which is a really wonderful presentation. One of the things that's helpful as far as terminology is to define individuals differently. One way of defining what I call smalls, or the person on the submissive side of the slash in an age play or a caretaker little relationship, we can call under a category of smalls. They range in kind of identified ages from what we call adult babies, or people who enjoy being involved in infantile kind of relationships. They may wear diapers, they may use a pacifier, they may be pre-verbal, to littles, who frequently are defined as anyone from the age of about 3 or 4 to 7 or 8 or 9. Some people have a wider age range than that. And also littles are also referred to sometimes as anyone who is an age player who is not, who age regresses, and so they may not necessarily have that category of the age range. Middles are pretty much frequently referred to as people who age from around 7 to 13 or so, although it's a bit different range. Now, baby girls and baby boys, there's lots of different uses of those names, especially when it comes to FetLife. There aren't a lot of choices on caretaker little relationships on FetLife on how to identify yourself. So most people identify there as a baby girl or a baby boy. In the field, that can mean pretty much anything. It could be just someone who, you know, when you look at them, you go, ah, that's cute. Or it could be people who identify as a teenager or anyone around. I usually use the term in my interaction of a baby girl or a baby boy as someone who identifies as somewhat of an age, who does some kind of age interaction, who's usually more of the teenage years, who's not necessarily a little, but a lot of people use that differently. But if I say a baby girl, I'm either referring to their aspect of FetLife or what they're doing. Now, a brat is not necessarily an age type, but it's kind of a interaction style in a caretaker little relationship where the small acts up in ways that are bratty and doesn't necessarily take direction, and sometimes they do that to be punished and to get the reaction. Sometimes it's because they just want to function that way. Sometimes they just want what they want to be. There are certainly other categories that are put in there, like princess, and there's other definition of an angel, and there's other definitions of ways of interaction, of being a pumpkin, and there are other kind of things that frequently people who are very into the DDLG little girl relationships that, you know, can identify themselves in those ways, but we don't need to necessarily go that way. There are people who identify as a preteen or teenagers, and there's other people who identify as a Lolita. And a Lolita is identified a little bit differently. They identify more as a teenager who is very sexually provocative and wanting to be almost seductress of people. And all of these titles can be of either gender, and so forth. When we try to provide gender-neutral descriptions of people, we can frequently, the current use that I use is caretaker little. And so on the little side, would be talking about smalls. So on the big side, which is the dominant side of the slash, frequently people can identify as daddies or mommies, uncles, aunts, brothers, and sisters. They can identify as a caretaker, or sometimes a diaper lover, which is someone who really likes a person who's an adult baby. Now, the adult baby diaper lover group, they're part of age play, and they're part of certainly caretaker little relationships, but they frequently stand aside and kind of have their own kind of community going. Sometimes they become very integrated into the larger mainstream communities. Other times they are more aloof. And people, bigs can be doms or masters or switches. And also sometimes a little can also be on the dominant side, and have another little being the person that they submit to. So just as any kind of DS relationship can have definitions that are a little bit blended, these can as well. So those are on the sides of it, on the small and big side. The other issue to talk about is the dynamic. There are different types of dynamics. And I should add a fourth one or fifth one there. There are individuals who identify as daddies or littles or or people in that kind of relationship who really aren't, who just use the terminology, or just like to have a relationship that is not necessarily so much of a where the submissive is being submissive. They're wanting to be more taken care of, that don't necessarily play into age regression or into age play or things like that. There is a type of dynamic that is role play. That is where people put on a role, just like some people in DS relationships will become, you know, the French maid and or the school teacher and the student, or the cop and the arrestee, or the soldier and so forth. That is a role play type of dynamic. And in age play, a lot of people think of that as role play, and that's one definition. There's also a relationship type where it is not necessarily role play, but it is part of their relationship. They live it, they interact with it. And also there's a personality type, which I'll talk about a little bit too, where people really identify as a caretaker, a daddy, or as a little, as part of who their personality is. It's not necessarily that they're playing a role. They're not necessarily pretending. That's part of where their personality is. And it's not necessarily the total personality. The last point I put down here is a disorder. There are some individuals, unfortunately, in the world who are adults, who have an average intelligence that function in a level where they can't function in an adult life. And they function as a child, and that's not part of this disorder. That's not part of what we're talking about here. If someone is to that place where they can't function in any adult role and they need help, that is more of a mental health disorder and they need help. So we'll move on to the next slide. There are characteristics of age players, and I'm talking more about people in a relationship. I mean, smalls are more likely to people who have a childlike wonder. They like, you know, they may like cartoons, coloring books, coloring. They desire to be nurtured. They have a playful nature. They don't have to be bratty, but they have a natural curiosity. They kind of open themselves up. And I thank Coco for this slide as well. And on the big side, there are people who desire to nurture. They're probably frequently exceptionally kind and patient. They may be disciplinarians when needed to, and authoritative and decisive, but the bigs in their personality frequently attract smalls. They're kind of like going together. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I don't hear you.
I've already advanced it twice. Do you want me to keep
my bad,
going?
my bad. I'm sorry. Go back. Back to what the, yeah, there we go. I'm sorry. So what are the attractions of age play? I mean, frequently in any kind of definition, it can be a brief reprieve from adult life. It can be a way to reconnect, reclaim part of yourself, maybe have fun. It can be really a tool for kinky and sexy times. So I want to open up the questions for you. What are the attractions of what you would define as age play, and how do you define that, and how do you define, what are the attractions for you in the audience for this type of relationship, for those of you who are interested in it or have explored it?
And if anybody wants to speak, go ahead and raise your hands. I will say, for my part, I have an upper respiratory thing going on here. I'm sorry for that. For my part, I find that when I, at 5'4", stand up next to Master when she comes home, or when she's dressed up, starting at 5'7" and then in heels, that it triggers all kinds of little boy feelings in me. Although my own mother was only 4'10½". So this is not that I'm feeling that Jen is in any way a mother fantasy. I do have little boy feelings when I stand next to her, since she's towering over me by a substantial amount.
Arak?
Arak, yes, Master Arak.
I suppose I would identify with a personality type. I really enjoy taking care of people, advising, teaching, just taking care of my girl, trying to help her when I can, and yeah, as she would probably say, and take advantage of her when I can. Yes.
Cool. Anybody else want to comment?
Nikita.
Nikita, go ahead.
Ursula.
Ursula?
It's Ursula here. I was going to say that,
Still far away.
no, still no good, eh?
It's getting better.
Yeah? Okay, new camera. I don't think the audio is as good. What I was going to say is I really think that Mistress is exceptionally patient with me. So, because I can be, I think it's playful. She calls it bratty, you know, every now and then. I try not to push it too much. But I also like the sense of wonder that you know, we associate with children. I think that's something that's really nice to try and hold on to, actually, as an adult, you know. And that's, I think, as a role play, it's just kind of for fun.
Your volume is getting better and better. Keep doing whatever you're doing.
Okay.
The HypnoFun says, can you read that?
Let me see.
I can do it.
Go ahead. She has the wrong glasses for reading that. I can read it from here. When I regress somebody, says HypnoFun, I like the way he transforms completely. His language changes, his mannerisms change, his vocabulary changes. It is interesting to see the complete transformation. Thank you.
I will respond to that too. My little is not on the broadcast tonight, but if she were and I were speaking to her, oh, sweetie, that sounds wonderful. Oh, thank you so much. You see, my voice becomes much more lyrical. I become more animated. When I speak, there is a way that I interact and I pull out the littleness in my partner that is like, oh, it just is a personality change in me as well. So, and I'll kind of switch back to my more adult self, but when I'm functioning as a daddy, there is a way, and it's important, I think, in many relationship type and personality type daddy little girl or caretaker little relationships, you will see that there's a way to signal the difference between when they're in big space and they're in little space, and it's by tone of voice and by context and word choice, and we switch in and out of that seamlessly. And I can watch my girl, and we're walking through a store, and things are going fine, and then all of a sudden her steps become smaller, and she starts touching things all around the store. Oh, can I have this? Can I have that? You know, and all of a sudden, I mean, she's in little space, and I know she's in little space. And for me as a daddy, it really, what I get out of it is just this sense of being able to nurture. And to interact in a way that my goal is to help and nurture her, not to necessarily have her submit to me, because in our relationship, she doesn't, you know, as when she's little, she's not submitting necessarily in a way that's more like a submissive to a dominant. It's more like a child to a parent and to somebody they care for. And so there's nurturing there. And so she is not necessarily like she has to obey me or do things right or wrong. I have to adapt myself to her and to her helping and nurturing. And so that's how it does. That's what it kind of does for me. And I have a slide in a couple slides down that I'll really hit on this again about what, you know, what the benefit might be. But that's kind of where we go from it. That age play is, or these type of relationships are to be fun and to be interesting, and they're okay. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Let's talk for a moment in the next slide about what age play is not.
All right, Master Tandir had her hand up for just a moment.
Okay, my bad.
It's an old hand, but Master Tandir, would you like a moment to say something?
No, thank you. I was just testing something.
Okay. Master Arak, did you still have your hand up, or is that an old hand? Oh, no. Master Arak has gone to sleep at the wheel.
No, I'm sorry. I was on the chat, and I can't get to the appropriate buttons until I switched. I will lower my old hand.
Cool. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Daddy, back to you.
Okay, good. So what age play isn't is on the next slide. Age play is not an excuse for bad behavior in adult life. It's not an excuse for taking care of ourselves. It's not a permanent hiding place from adult responsibility. So age play is also not reality. Littles are not children. Littles and people who are smalls who are adults, who are functioning with adult consent, they are not children. This is not about having an inappropriate or sexual relationship with children. If anyone in the DS relationship is a child, that's not a DS relationship. That's potentially child abuse. If anyone in the relationship is primarily attracted to children and playing this out from that, that's also not what this is about. So if you truly believe that you are a child or that and so forth, then that's not what it's about. So the reality is this is a consensual relationship that is between two adults, and that opens up some aspects of the relationship which are really, truly amazing and beautiful that couldn't be there if one or more of the participants was actually a child. The next slide is where I come down. Age play for me is a couple of things. It's a large term that a lot of people use to define a category of thing like impact play or sadism or masochism or so forth. So a lot of people use the word age play to refer to anything that has any age dynamic in it. So certainly we accept that term, but more specifically, I use the word age play as a role play, where people are taking on specific roles that are different from their norms. So truthfully, most of the time, I'm not an age player. I don't do a lot of age playing. We don't do a lot of age playing. We are actually more of a relationship or personality based, so that we are interacting in a way that is not that way. Who's broadcasting? Arch, could you mute for a second? Thank you. Okay. So so there's a difference between if we define age play in a narrower term as putting on a role. That's wonderful. People can put on a role and become this and become that. And sometimes that's a wonderful dynamic. And it can be also the basis of a relationship. It can be done in texting. It can be done in interaction. It can be done in a bedroom scene and so forth. But we're putting on a role, you know, of a younger or age involved in that. And it could be, there's the other aspect of a caretaker-little relationship that is more of a personality and a relationship base. If you ask most people who identify as a little, they don't think of themselves as role players. They have their dynamic as part of their personalities and their relationship, and their littleness and caretaking are not acting but fundamental parts of who they are that don't go away at the end of the scene. That doesn't mean that they're not always there. Sometimes they can feel like a big. Sometimes they can feel like a slave or a dominant or a submissive or a switch or something like that. But there's an aspect of their personality that does age regress, and it has that as part of their personality. And sometimes they will age play as part of that. They'll put on another way of being that's outside of their normal orientation, like my little who generally functions around the age of 3 to 7, may all of a sudden we may do a little interaction where she's, you know, we're pretending that she's a teenager or something. And so that there is role play in it, but it's not necessarily that way. So the next slide that you have here right up that's called littles. Littles are adults who have a portion of their personality state that expresses in the younger part of themselves. The age regression is a part of a personality that occurs frequently unconsciously when it's safe or when it's when they have a need, when they feel needy or sick. I had a little at one point in time who actually was a slave, but she functioned as a little when in a relationship with me, and at bedtime she became really little. She wanted Daddy to tuck her in and put her to bed and, you know, read her story and turn on her nightlight and so forth. And when she was feeling sick, she wasn't feeling sexual, but she needed Daddy to come and nurture her and just put her to bed and make sure she brushed her teeth and went to the potty and did all those things. And so frequently regression is a fluid, unconscious thing that happens when they feel the need to do it. And sometimes they don't regress. They don't feel like they can do that. If you ask a true little what age they are, they'll probably look at you and say, I don't know. Whereas you ask an age player who's role-playing what age they're role-playing, they'll say, I'm playing 7 or playing 13. But you ask a true little that's part of their personality, most frequently they'll look at you and say, I don't really know. And so you have to ask, what do you enjoy doing? Do you enjoy being in a crib and wearing diapers and sucking a pacifier? Do you enjoy coloring and watching Disney movies? Do you enjoy playing soccer and going to the park? Do you enjoy going to the mall and shopping and wearing makeup and wearing short dresses? Then you can get an idea of where they are in an age range, and it may fluctuate over time. Being big is also part of themselves. When a little needs to function, they call themselves being big. They're taking on adult responsibilities and they're doing things, and sometimes that's hard. But all littles have to be able to function on an adult level and be big sometimes. When in little space, little may function emotionally and cognitively in a less mature level, although maintaining adult status. That means, like Piaget says, that we're in a pre-operational standpoint when we're little kids. Then we become to concrete operations, and then we become more concrete and become the ability to deal with abstractions. So my little, when she is regressed, she's not going to, sometimes when she's truly in little space, she's not going to process a lot of abstract kind of things. So you can expect the emotional functioning and the cognitive functioning actually to regress back to a certain extent, but it's done in an adult context, so it's just not a little child. But, a temper tantrum is going to be very appropriate. Now, a temper tantrum in a sub is, most dominants or masters in a slave or a sub relationship aren't going to put up with a temper tantrum at all. That's bad behavior. But in a little, that's normal. Temper tantrum is normal, and Daddy can deal with it, but that's part of normal functioning. So part of the understanding is when you have a little who truly is in little space and age regressed, she may function or he may function in that way and have temper tantrum. So I wanted to open it up to people who have felt like little or small or something like that in the past, or those who are on the daddy or the dominant side or master side of things who have interacted with others. What's being little or having a little or in little space like for you?
I can see we have a race for volunteering. Did you wish to say anything?
No, just because I like to be tucked in does not make me a little.
We tend to be a master-slave group, so we're listening to you out of curiosity.
Okay, let's go to the next piece. Okay. This is what I talk about. Sometimes in the community, there are a lot of people who define themselves as daddies. And, there are a lot of dominant kinksters who like to call themselves daddies, but really enjoy, exploiting vulnerability for their own pleasure, which is okay. But if they're interacting with a true little, that may not be what that little needs. And so it's okay to call yourself a daddy or to be a dom and so forth. There's lots of ways to doing it. But when we're interacting with someone who actually age regresses, the caretaking responsibility. What really is a daddy? And that's why I kind of presented this. Who's your daddy? Daddiness means different things to different people, and it's okay to meet your way you are as long as it interacts with your partner in a way that works for them. And there's no right way or wrong way to do it. But understand that there are individuals who identify as littles who I remember having a person that I informally mentored or was concerned about that I met online and I've never met in real life but talked to, and this woman was very much a little and functioned much of the time on a little basis and was trying in the community to find someone to be a daddy or a dominant. And I just had this visual image of a preschooler in panties with a sippy cup and a blankie walking through a dungeon and having sadists look at her on the way by and just wanting to pick this little girl up and run. It's like, no, but the reality is most people who are dominant or sadists in the community, they understand what the needs of the other people are. But there can be people who can function in this way that really are not prepared to do it. And it's really neat. You start to see it more and more, and you go to a dungeon or a play party in a group, and you'll find people that are dressed and functioning as littles. And I think that the dynamic is being more accepted. And I had a relationship, a DS relationship with a person who had formerly started as a slave. And actually, we did get to a place where she was collared, but she functioned mostly as a submissive and as a little, but she had some slave tendencies to her, and she needed that part of it. So I had to function both in a role of being a type of a dominant, quote unquote, master type, and a daddy at the same time, and switch back and forth between those. And that was difficult, but it's possible. And there are lots of relationships that have that they can have times when the slave or the submissive is kneeling at the master or dominant's feet. And there's other times when they switch into a mode where, she's jumping into her lap and, and so forth, or vice versa. So it's a dynamic. Let's move to the next slide. So I want to differentiate it with you just to throw a little bit about what the difference between, in my opinion, between little space and subspace is. Subspace, in my opinion, is a mental and physiological altered state. But they maintain their emotional maturity and functioning level. But it's a physiological change that happens and a psychological change that happens. Little space can have components of that, but it can be also an emotional and behavioral regression to a simpler or a younger state while maintaining adult consent. In little space, there is need for nurture and guidance from the caretaker. Kind of subspace is more needing to submit to the will of the dominant. Or in the master-slave relationship, it may be more the need to serve the master. In little space shifts, they shift into little space when needy or when they're safe or overwhelmed or happy or something like that. Whereas sometimes more in subspace, that shift happens more based on psychological and mental stimulation. And also, for me, there's a difference in purpose. The purpose in subspace is a need for physical and emotional release in submission to a dom. Versus in little space is more of a need of expression of self and needing caring. So does that make sense, kind of differentiating between these two?
Yes, it makes enough sense, but I just wrote it down as a note.
Good.
I've never heard it before. Thank you for saying that.
And so certainly people in little space can achieve subspace as well. I mean, there are times when I'll have my little and we're interacting in a, she's in little space, but we're doing impact play and she's getting spanked and she will go into subspace. But there's also the aspect of what happens in little space may be different from an experiential basis than what happens not in little space. So whereas my current partner and a previous partners both had experiences of being both DOMs and switches and submissives, and both enjoy impact play. When I bring impact play in little space, the experience can be different because you're experiencing it from a different level. So someone who enjoys being flogged or beaten with a leather belt and getting marks, doing intense bondage and tied up and really having impact play as a sub, as soon as they become in little space, pulling out a ruler and spanking them may feel completely different. They may feel like they've just been violated. And so you have to be very careful when you're taking someone in little space, because that person may, the day before or hours before, wanted you to leave marks. I remember my last baby girl. I mean, she wanted marks that would be left for days. But when in little space, could be a different thing. And when we talk about sexuality in little space, it can be also a different thing too. So it's not that way for everyone, and it's not that way each time. But be aware when you have someone who really functions in little space, the experience may be different for them in little space than it may be in subspace. And so if they're functioning as a sub, then then it's fine. When little space, you taking them over your knee and spanking them to the point that they're have a really red bottom, or in pulling out the belt and really beating them, they may not want that at all. They may feel abused. So you have to be careful. Does that make sense? Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so age-based emotional fluctuation in little. So when a little...
Actually, Daddy, Nikita and Ursula have their hand up. If we could call on them for a moment.
Please.
Hi there. I was just going to say I really understand about being in a different headspace. Mistress and I do pony play sometimes, and if I were to get a good spanking in pony play, I don't think I'd know quite what to do. It's a completely different headspace then again. So that does make a lot of sense. You have to be careful, to account for what headspace there is. Makes good sense. Thank you.
And Master Jay, thank you for joining us and welcome. And I'll go mute again and Master has a question. Go ahead. I'm
going to ask this, and you may cover it further down. Long story, I'm known for that. We were at a conference, and we had a puppy who was misbehaving, which started a conversation. We were at another conference, and we had a lot of people dressed as really toddlers. Mm-hmm. So the question for both of these situations were, when do you know how to treat someone some way? So if they're a puppy, they want to be treated as a puppy, but really they're a person. And if they're a toddler, they want to have that interaction as a toddler, but really they're an adult. So how do you know when to treat someone who is dressed as a toddler? When are they in that headspace?
So that's an excellent question, and it also brings up another dynamic that I didn't necessarily put in the slides. Caretaker little relationships and also puppy play or pet play and so forth can happen in 3 different domains. They can happen in a private. They can happen in kind of a real public domain out in the world with, in the street, in the, in people's homes, at work and so forth. And they can happen in a BDSM community kind of space. And it kind of matters the difference. a puppy or a little is has the ability to act how they want to act in private, in conjunction with their daddy, master, and so forth, with little concern about how that impacts others. In certainly a dungeon or a conference or a place that is a BDSM or a leather community, there are certainly rules and expectations of behavior in that community. And every member of the BDS community or leather community or kink community should be expected to understand what those patterns of behavior are and to obey them. So their own kink doesn't allow them necessarily to disrupt other people or to disrupt what's happening in that community without censure. And certainly the leaders of the community are entitled to censure them if they're breaking the rules of the community. Now, if they want to go in private in somewhere and and act out in some way or act in a conjunction with it, they're certainly welcome to do that. But also, just like in other DS relationships or master-slave relationships, they're a puppy to their owner, they're a little to their caretaker, but they're not a little to you and me. And so we need to ask permission to interact with them and find out what they feel comfortable with. I remember walking through a dungeon and seeing a girl dressed in, Hello Kitty stuff with her sippy cup and so forth, and, with her daddy. I really wanted to go up and talk to them because, I thought that was wonderful. But I realized from nonverbals that they weren't open to interacting with other people, so I didn't. And I certainly would not be entitled to go up and interact with her. Oh, your sippy cup is so cute. That would be inappropriate for me to do because I'm not her daddy. And so that kind of is, if a puppy is misbehaving in public, then there needs to be expectations for that. However, if their role in the public place is open to be who they are, then you know what? Puppies do that. Puppies go up and smell other people's bottoms and things like that. So does that answer your question?
It does. And it's sort of how we handled it. We said, well, they have a daddy and they have an owner. I guess I would expect that if I were in little headspace, that people are going to speak to me while I was in little headspace as a little, and it's just there's no way of knowing whether somebody is role playing or really in little headspace. And the answer that I heard you say was that we find they're big.
The situation was actually at a national conference, and it was in the foyer. As I recall, and this leather puppy, was behaving puppy-like in the hotel foyer around Leathermen, and who weren't sure whether to say something to the
bad puppy,
or to later find the puppy's owner and tell him that the puppy was being inappropriate and ill-handled.
Okay, but you took away from my question. If somebody is in little headspace, right, there's no way to know whether they're in little headspace or whether they're role-playing.
Right. So if they're role-playing or a little headspace, both they're maintaining a role. I would be careful about it, but if they seem open for interaction, I would interact with them in the way that seems best. But you don't have to necessarily cater in a way that to their needs in a way that's inappropriate for your relationship with them, or expect them to, or they should be expected to behave in a way that's appropriate for their surroundings as well. Now, if someone's, sitting in a dungeon coloring, and they seem open to it and their caretaker seems open to it, you can go up and say that's a pretty picture, and I would interact with them in the way that their behavior seems to do that, and that's appropriate. As long as you feel that interaction with them at all is appropriate as far as the protocol of the community. Each community has different sets of protocols and a manner of stricture, and so some communities you can barely even look at someone without asking permission. In other places, unfortunately there's no protocol and people are doing things that many of us would feel very uncomfortable with. So You have to match it to the surroundings as well. But yeah, I think it's okay with permission to interact with them at the level that you think that they're at, as long as you're comfortable doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Okay. Other questions or concern, comments, input? Okay. So, what implication? I want to ask these questions. What implications would this have for DS relationships and interactions? The idea that when little's behavior and cognition regress and align to a younger age, and they may not cognitively be fully functioning. You know, they're functioning as an adult, so they're both. It's a parallelism. They're both an adult, but also they're emotionally maybe not functioning in the same way. What implications does that have for you as for us as dominants and so forth in interacting with a person like that? Or for those of you who have considered being a daddy or a caretaker?
Floor is open. Nikita and Ursula, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Nikita here. Since I don't identify as a mummy or a caretaker, I'm going to say foster care. So if I've got, you know, a slave or a sub that's gone into little space, I want a foster mom for them. Just saying.
I would think it might be harder to discipline them, because it's not, you know, you would have to choose your discipline very carefully, I would think.
Actually, you're bringing up a point that Master Andy and Slave Sue have discussed with us, because she's also a little, but not very often. And they've related the challenge that Andy's had when they're in the middle of some kind of normal MS living, and she drops into little headspace, and he's found that challenging to switch into an appropriate responsive headspace.
I would think, you know, having to make the switch that quickly would be quite difficult and quite challenging. You would have to be able to recognize that she was even there, and that, I imagine that could be hard. It could just be her being upset or sad about something when actually she's gone back emotionally and is less developed than an actual adult.
A lot of people say that if they're really paying attention, you can see a change in the face. You can see the eyes change, but it's stopping long enough to notice that if somebody were to drop into a little headspace.
Particularly if the discussion were emotionally charged.
Right.
And I know of another relationship where the person who was petitioning this particular master was bratty and childlike, and the master was particularly
not okay with that.
Yeah, he was particularly by the book MS, and they never that woman could never form a bond with him because he couldn't.
They just didn't know what to do with her.
Frankly, I sympathized with him. I wouldn't have known what to do with her either.
Yeah. We do have to ask, put out into discussion, having the top side of the slash, who may drop into different ages.
Right.
You know, how common is that? What's a slave to do if their master all of a sudden becomes a little bratty?
Well, yeah, boy has that problem. Master is jocular and light, and boy has trouble following that. He has to think his way into being jocular.
And I have to tell you I'm being playful.
She has to specifically say she's being playful, or I'll react solemnly. So, but we're distracting Daddy from the presentation.
It's the same thing, having a DS interaction, and you're having...
Yeah. I tend to completely live in MS. It's very hard to extract me from that headspace.
Yes, and there are times when I think that understanding the difference and understanding that every dynamic can have lots of ways of functioning, as long as you're in agreement with the individuals involved in the relationship and discuss it, it can work out. The tools and the skills that are needed are important. If you'll go to the next slide.
But we've got a hand from Nikita.
Please do.
Just a moment.
Sorry, I just had one more thought for the implications. I was wondering, is all brat play age play? Because we know some people who are submissives who are extremely bratty. And we've also actually even taken classes on brat play, and some of the stuff that they were demonstrating just wouldn't even occur to me. But I was like, is it actually a regression? Is it some form of age play?
I have a point of view on this, although I've never said it out loud with others around that have any kind of knowledge. So I'll say it out loud and get a reaction from people who actually know the difference. My sense of this has been that the people that are generally bratty are also spankos. And this, the only time I've really thought of, yes, no?
I'm not a spanko.
The only time I've really thought of this had to do with this girl that was bratty and oppositional. The girl that was bratty and this master, and she was just completely spanko, and that got me thinking about, and he wasn't. He was a master. And so that got me thinking about whether the crossover from the spanking community and brattiness, which is part of their protocols, somehow crosses over. I don't know. Yes, Nikita and Ursula?
So is there an age component to spankos?
No, there wasn't. I've never seen that. So
then brattiness can be either spankos or age.
The people, I guess what I'm thinking is that the people whose normal being in life is to be bratty seem to be the people of the feminine persuasion who also were spankos, because that's their language of engagement.
Dr. Bob, from a leather perspective, I think that you'll see that probably a lot more in the leather communities and in the master-slave kind of communities and so forth. In the DDLG or caretaker little communities, there certainly are people who are brats, and there are certainly people who function to misbehave in order to get spankings. And spanking and kind of brattiness kind of go together to a certain extent, but not all the time. There can be an age component, either an age play, meaning a role playing, or a age regression kind of, part of their character as a brat. You could go online and take a test of what kind of little you are, and find that you're a brat rather than an angel or a princess or something like that. But that brattiness is separate, and they're not all relationships or caretaker little relationships involve brattiness. As a matter of fact, my girl doesn't want to be a brat at all. She wants to be what they call a good girl and an angel. She doesn't want to have to misbehave in order to get things, but she wants to be spanked sometimes too. Whereas I have another partner who's like, oh, I've been a bad girl, now I need to be spanked, but not initially go out to do it. But certainly, brattiness can be non-related to age play. There can be people who are submissives or kinksters or of any persuasion in the BDSM community that can have brattiness. But when it is involved in age play or caretaker little types of relationships where there's a personality type in there, it's part of that dynamic, and so that's my perspective on it. I'm not sure that's necessarily the only answer.
You want your next slide now?
Yes, please. So here's some of the skills and responsibilities, I think, to care for littles in little space. First of all, understanding the dynamic, understanding what's going on. That it's just not that this person doesn't want to be submissive, this person doesn't want to serve, and they're not being wrong. It's just that, for them, they're reverting to a place where they're wanting nurture. And nurturing is not necessarily based on obedience. It's not based on submission. It's based on unconditional positive regard and love. And so the ability to shift purposes to nurturing and caretaking rather than the dominant desires. Frequently on the top part of the slash, on the dominant or master part of the slash, frequently there is a focus on what the dominant or the master's desires are, or the owner's desires are. And certainly in Daddy Little Girl or in Caretaker Little, there are times when the caretaker's needs need to be met. But there's also needs to be the understanding that at times in Little Space, that it's the need to be a nurturing person rather than to accomplish the desires. So the ability to intuit the emotional functioning level of the little and not mistake that. You're not going to be able to talk to somebody who's in the little head space, who is functioning at a pre-verbal level like you're going to talk to an adult or someone who's a teenager. You know, and the teenagers who are age players or in a small relationship, I mean, they're just almost intolerable to deal with because, well, they're like normal teenagers. Oh my gosh. Anyway, so understanding of the meaning of actions may differ by emotional level. And so the meaning of, coming and crying, the meaning of saying, putting up their hands and saying, I don't want to, I don't want to, I don't want to, or things like that may be completely different than, someone who is in adult space saying, look, I don't want to be part of this relationship anymore. Dominant's ability to enter caretaker personality state, a daddy space, caretaker space. There is kind of a caretaker space or a caretaker head space where you get in, like I get into that where I become nurturing, and it's not like, okay, well, I'm feeling really turned on tonight or really horny tonight and so forth, and I'd really like to do something, but I realize that, she's not in that place at all. Well, what is my role as a caretaker? My role as a caretaker is to take care of my little. So my needs get subrogated to my little's needs. So it's not like I'm going to say, no, you need to snap out of it because I want you to perform, this sexual act with me. No, and that's not where I'm at. So it is a changing of the dynamic on the master side of the piece as well. So also caretakers' ability to make fluid changes to match the emotional needs and states. I can tell you that they can change from one minute to the other, and ability to also maintain structure, routine, and discipline. This is what most littles want, is they want structure. They want a bedtime routine, they want discipline, they want to be able to rely on what's going to happen in their lives. Just as children frequently function better in structure, and when they're upset, put them in water. There are things that you can do in this kind of a dynamic to structure and routine. I think they're important in many types of DS relationships, but especially in these kind of relationships. And so that can be something that I think the skills are needed to have. And when we talk about sexuality in a minute, there'll be some more skills. Questions, comments, or interactions around this issue?
Master Rock had his hand up. Go ahead.
I was interested with what you were talking about as far as the dominance ability or willingness to enter caretaker personality state, depending on depending on the issues with their little, which seem to me to be very much that the little is in fact in control of the relationship.
I caught that too.
Well, before you answer, Daddy, let me just make a comment that it's 9:05, so 10:05 to you, and we normally close down by about quarter after. But we would like. I'm fascinated by this. You're only barely halfway into your slides, and I wonder if you'd be willing to schedule a part 2 in about 6 or 7 weeks.
I would. That would be fine.
Because I don't want to miss this material, and I don't want to rush you, and you've got a lot left.
I'd be glad to do that.
Okay.
So Iraq.
I've got Iraq, and I've got Tandir.
I personally would love it if you could come back, because we have a growing community of littles up here, and adult babies and diaper lovers, and I'm sure they would love to listen to all this information, because they have a hard time being understood and getting people to play with them. So this is helping me a great deal because this is something I'm having difficulty wrapping my head around. But the more information I have, the better it is.
I identify with what you're saying about it being a little confusing for those of us in the MS side. I wasn't aware there was much community here, and I will make sure, Master Tandir, that you have as soon as I can get to my schedule and work it out with Daddy, I'll let you know.
May I say that calling it a little confusing seems very appropriate.
All right.
May I answer the question that was presented?
Yes.
Certainly from a perspective of a leather community or a master-slave community, focus, it will be confusing to see the little's needs driving the relationship. And it would feel like, there are a lot of people in the community who use the term topping from the bottom and so forth that become very, kind of nasty kind of ways of saying that that's not appropriate. In this dynamic, the caretaker, there's age play which is put on roles, and that's not appropriate in that. But in people that are actually in this dynamic as part of their personality types or functioning, the caretaker and the little enter into this relationship, and this dynamic is different. The dynamic, the daddy or the caretaker is in control, but just as in normal parenting, it's not their will that drives things. It's the needs of nurturing and development of the small that is the purpose of the relationship. And so caretaker gets their needs to nurture and to be obeyed and to be followed and to be looked up to as part of the dynamic. But small gets their needs for nurture and guidance and someone to look up to and to provide structure as part of it too. So the dynamic is fundamentally different. And it doesn't have to be. There can be ways that aren't that way, but it is different. And truthfully, the caretaker does guide the relationship. And because there are things that aren't okay for the small to do. They're not okay under any circumstances, and there are other times that they need guidance and direction. But their emotional needs can guide the tenor of the relationship. Now, there are some DS relationships that are caretaker little relationships, which are much more in line with a typical DS relationship, where really little defines what follows what daddy was. I remember talking to a girl once who says she was a little, and her greatest inexperience in life was spending a week in a dungeon of her daddy, and where she spent hours chained to a horse and was beaten, and she loved it. She loved every minute of it. That sounded to me a lot more like a dominant-submissive relationship than a caretaker-little relationship. But she just decided it that way. I'm not telling her she's wrong. But I can tell her and others that there are people in the community who identify as littles or as smalls who need their need for nurturing brought forward in the relationship, and are caretakers who really benefit from the relationship by their ability to provide nurturing and care.
Well, in the larger sense, what you're saying before we call back on Iraq and Master Tandir, in a larger sense, what I'm hearing you say is that we have a phrase in the MS community that is, while slave is in service to master, master is in service to the relationship. And I'm hearing that same theme echoed in your language.
Yes.
Master Iraq, you had your hand up first.
I think actually that was well answered as far as my question. I appreciate your connecting it to the master is in service of a relationship, which I believe very strongly. So I can see how that dynamic works, though I do tend to enjoy the feeling of being in charge and saying, no, right now, my needs are going to be served. Thank you very much.
Well, that serves the relationship.
Yes.
Master Tandir?
I was wondering, I may have missed it before, but recently I had someone up here use the term of a middle. Is this something that somebody just made up around here, or is this actually something that you are calling a small? It's somebody who's not quite a preteen, but it's not a toddler either. And Master Bob, when you were yeah, brain's not working. There is a large community of adult babies and toddlers and stuff in Austin. You just don't come to Club Femme, so you don't know about it.
The term small is one that I adopted from my friend who's Coco, who's out of Atlanta, which I believe is a term that I'm using to define all people across the dynamic of age players or caretaker little relationships from any age kind of functioning range. The term middle is a term that's fairly well defined, that although people fluctuate on what the age functioning range is, it's from around 8 to 13 or 14. So its littles are generally in the range of 3 to 7, 8, 9. But middles are more of elementary school to that kind of functioning, and it's well defined in the caretaker little community or the DDLG community. There are many people who identify as middles, and their needs are a little bit different. They're not necessarily going to, get on the floor and color and watch Disney films and things like that as much, but little more. But it is a defined term that's accepted across the community fairly with regularity. And the adult babies and diaper lovers are more coming into. We're seeing them more coming into the mainstream BDSM community. We're starting to see them more at events and so forth, where they were kind of a fringe group before. And I think that they're more identifying with a caretaker little dynamics. But they certainly are welcomed in the community, and the community, has been even somewhat less accepting of them. I think the overall community has been, and so that's one thing that we hope to change over time. Whatever your dynamic is, as long as that everyone involved is consenting and is of age to consent, is okay. And if it works for you, it's good. And we don't need to put it down, even though we may not understand it, or it may, not be something that we can interact with. And I think that's one of the things in the community that's good, is that we can accept other types of creative sexuality.
I think the one of the main concerns with this aspect of our community is that state of consent. Is if they're in little headspace, can they give consent for a relationship or for SM play? I mean, really, how? I know this is going to sound just really naive, but how real is the headspace?
I tell you, we have a friend, and Master Tandir may recall the situation, although I won't name names. But there was a guy up in he was professionally he taught hypnosis for the dental industry up in a city near here, and he was part of our community for a while. And he had his submissive manifested as about a 3 or 4 year old. And the issue in this community came up about whether or not his play was ethical. And he ultimately got himself banned from every group in Austin and every group in San Antonio. And the guy's got a doctorate. This was sort of a shame. But we also had a problem in our community years ago with a couple from, again, a community outside of here, where the woman had multiple personality disorder, and you weren't sure. There was a question raised by the leadership of one of our groups here about whether, in fact, she could give consent, because you didn't ever know when you were going to get the other person, and she was unmedicated because of their religious beliefs.
Right. So if you're dropping into little and you give consent as an adult, and then you go into that safe space or whatever causes you to go into a little headspace, have you given consent, or does it still apply?
Yeah, let me take that. Oh, go ahead, Bob.
I'm just saying it's 1/4 after. This is so interesting. I don't want to shut it down, but I would like you to draw it to a close at a point where we can pick this up again in a few weeks. And I've got to check my schedule and get with you tomorrow about
No
that.
problem. Let me answer that question quickly, and can you move to the next slide that's what's special, and that was a good place to end.
Okay, he's going to answer the question.
Okay, answering the question. These individuals are adults. They function as adults as far as consent. So little space or little head space is a regression in emotional and to a certain extent cognitive functioning, but it's within the backdrop that they are still adults. If we felt in some special circumstances like someone was not able to function as an adult, or that they had multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder, as we call it now, and were not fully able to consent, then that's not a DS relationship, because the DS relationship is based on consent. And every little should be able, their big or their caretaker or their dominant and so forth should be able to help them to be able to switch into big space and be able to ask them, okay, are you okay with what's happening here? And if they're not able to make that switch from little space into big space, when we, say red, we say, a safe word, or we say, master, if it pleases you, master, kind of thing. If we're not able to do that, then this is not a DS dynamic. It's not BDSM. It is something else. And so, on the fringe of the community, we may find some people that may have a serious problem with that. And those things need real work, and if we were in a group where we're leading that group, we shouldn't necessarily, we should be concerned about that. But, although I'm careful when I'm taking my little into certain things, when she's in that kind of space, she's still able to consent. She wants to be in this relationship. This is what works for her and so forth. So, I think I persuaded you too much about little space being actually a place where they can't function in the adult world. They can. It's a dual relationship. Just like when you're a submissive or a slave, you're still functioning in the reality of society in general. You're able to pay your taxes, you're able to do things like that. And so you're not to a point where that's the case. Hopefully that answers the question. If you would do this last slide that says, what is special? There you go. For me, the DDLG or caretaker-level relationship is a unique and vulnerable consensual relationship that nurtures a childlike part of a personality that is at the core of that person's ability to trust, love, and grow, and often fulfills a needed missing life experience in a healing or affirming manner that wasn't obtained in other relationships. So for me, it can be a very deep and different type of relationship, just as some of people find a master-slave relationship or a dominant-submissive relationship or some other kind of relationship reveals a unique need that's not available in vanilla types of life. This can also meet that need for people that find that that's helpful. And I think in that way, it can be special to those people who approach it.
It's very good. Thank you very much. Master Arak, do you have another question? It's an old hand again, Master Arak. All right. Well, let me draw this to a close then, and thank you very much. This has been a spectacular session this evening. I'm tremendously impressed with your breadth and depth of knowledge. It's really nice to have somebody that's credentialed on here. I have specific people I'll invite to the second session. This was really remarkable, and thank you very much. Does anybody have anything to say at the last minute? Arak?
Nothing, just to apologize for the age spots that are currently growing on my hands, and to thank your guest immensely for this stimulating discussion. Thank you.
Very good. Good job, Daddy.
One thing that I would like, I know that if others join us later on, if there's an opportunity, I know that some of these are accessible in another format, that they may be able to catch up with some of the things we did before. That might be helpful for them, so we don't have to go back and pick up with the other aspects. And in the next section, we'll be talking about some unique issues, including sexuality and some other things that take it to the next level.
Yes, Ava, Ava Durga is the second person on the list, is the director of the site, and she's texted to us, actually to everyone I see, that she will have it posted. It'll be posted within a few days. We will also put the link, when we announce the next one, we'll put the link to the old site in, and perhaps we would be able to get the announcement out a little earlier, considering that they would need to spend some time to listen to the prior session. All that's logistical, and we'll take care of that. I thank you very, really wonderful session this evening. We're honored that you would spend this time with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank everybody for coming out again and spending your Tuesday evening with us, and thank Ava for giving up her time and being here for us. We really do appreciate it. Master Tandir has her hand up.
Yes, Master Tandir, go ahead.
I'm sorry, that's an old hand. I'm dealing with a new kitten, so what may not have been me.
Not a problem. Anybody else? Nikita, Master J?
Next.
Yes?
Our next Tuesday webinar?
Our next Tuesday is hypnosis. It's an erotic hypnosis webinar being put on by some of you that are local will know Lucky Albatross. And she's the hypnotist is Bruce from Philadelphia, Brian from Philadelphia.
I'm so glad you pulled that up.
And she is Lucky Albatross. Used to live here in Austin, and she refers to herself, at least when we knew her last, as his hypno slave. Arak, did you have another question?
No, I guess it's just more age spots. Yes.
Very well. So the next stage is on erotic hypnosis, and we hope that some of you or all of you will be able to join us.
Great.
And that saying that, hearing nothing else, I will go ahead and close down for the evening.
And good night, little girl.
Good night.
Good night, Daddy.